Hi again and welcome back. This is session number 3 where we discuss balance. As a side note, you will need your workbook today because we will be looking specifically at a few of the sentences on the balance page. Okay then, let's go. So a couple of questions to get us started. Consider, when does the amount of judgmental speaking typically increase? And when do people tend to lose their way and need a map for getting back on track? Right, pressure. As more pressure is introduced into the environment, the need for a methodology for handling that pressure or that adversity becomes more and more important. Otherwise, you and your team have no chance for consistent performance. To that end, think about individuals and teams over the years that you would consider to be great. What are the keys to their greatness? Our perspective, 2 things: focus and timing. Focus is the ability to stay committed to the intended outcome regardless of what barriers block the path to success. Timing is the ability to take appropriate action regardless of the situations and circumstances. And the mechanism that supports focus and timing? Well, that would be balance. Balance is what enables you to stay focused and enables you to apply timing. One way you might be able to relate to this discussion is by thinking back to your childhood. You may have had teachers and coaches, mentors and parents constantly telling you, hey, keep your balance. While intended to be helpful, if you are like us, you may have found that the statement keep your balance alone was not that helpful. Maybe you felt as though the statement was a bit cliché. Unfortunately, clichés don't give you what you need to work through a problem or a breakdown, so many times clichés prove unhelpful in their triteness. What can be helpful? How about a map? Something tangible, something that gives you tools for 1, identifying quicker when you have lost your balance, and 2, gives you a methodology for what to do to get back on track. That's our aim, a simple, memorable, and impactful map that can be adopted into your process daily. Now, one final thing before we look at our map for balance, and this is meant to be a bit of a perspective from one of the great philosophers of all time. Obviously, Mike Tyson is not a great philosopher, but he did say something rather profound when he was the heavyweight champion of the world. Namely, everyone has a great strategy until they get punched in the face. Today's map is for what to do when you and your team get punched in the face. Let's look now at the first paragraph on the balance page in your workbook. What it says here is, all projects are started to earn more identity by accomplishing a particular future. While this may sound a bit confusing at first, don't overthink it. All we are attempting to do is make a statement of fact. Specifically, every project you take on is driven by your commitment to increase the goodwill of your personal brand, whether a work project or a family project like having a picnic with your spouse and kids. Even that project is driven by the commitment to increase your standing with your family. And the only way to achieve better standing is to accomplish your project X by time frame Y. If you don't, regardless of the reason why, your brand will take a hit. Hopefully this makes some sense and doesn't feel all that surprising. Truthfully, this is only a statement of fact about how the world works. It is the second sentence where we want to start to work on your mindset. See, inevitably when you take on a new project, a breakdown occurs. But think about what most people's opinion is of the word breakdown. Is it positive or negative? Negative, right? But what if breakdowns aren't bad? What if they aren't good either? What if they're just inevitable? The more projects you take on, the more breakdowns you will experience. As a matter of fact, what if the rest of your life actually looks like this? You start a project and you have a breakdown. Then you design a solution. Then another breakdown, another solution. Another breakdown, another solution, breakdown solution, breakdown solution, breakdown solution. Then you die. Not trying to sound morbid here, but the scary thing for us in our line of work is that too often we meet people who are waiting for the breakdowns to stop in order to get on with their lives. That is not how the world works. And the sooner we understand this, we can get over it so we can get on with it. Take a look now at the next sentence. See, in an effective community, a breakdown is not a problem. As a matter of fact, please write down this definition of a problem. A problem is a person's story about his inability to perform on a project. Why might this be an important definition? If this map came to mind, then you are on the right track. See, if someone launches into a story or judgment about why things are not working, they are using judgmental language, looking for someone else to agree with them about their story. all of that time is not going to help us achieve the future we intend. So again, in an effective community, a breakdown is not a problem. It's not time for judgmental speaking. It is, as the next sentence says, only a stop and an opportunity for learning. See, effective teams spend less time in the judgmental conversations for shame, blame, and guilt, and view the breakdowns as opportunities to learn, which, when you think about it, is the only reason to put a team together. Now add to all of this, what do we learn the most from? What we are doing great or not so great? Right, not so great. To drive home this perspective, let us tell you a quick story. Side note here, in case you're wondering why we do tell so many stories, it's because if you tell someone a fact, they will learn. If you tell them a truth, they will believe. And if you tell them a story, they will remember. Please remember this story. On the Discovery Channel recently, there was a show about how cattle and buffalo herds respond to an impending winter storm. For some reason, and no one knows why, how each responds to the oncoming threat is different. Herds of cattle run downwind from the storm, and the storm picks up in ferocity, and most of the herd dies. Buffalo herds have the opposite response. They run towards the storm. While the entire herd does not live, most of the buffalo come through the storm before it has reached a crescendo. It makes for a good visual for you going forward. Which way will you and your team turn when there is a breakdown? Downwind, allowing the breakdown to grow and fester, or into the breakdown so that you can learn and move on to the next one. Good food for thought. Okay, back to the workbook, for a minute anyway. Second paragraph now, the most important paragraph on the page, because here is where we show you the mechanism for working through breakdowns. What it says here is, the source or the cause of all breakdowns is intention. No intention, no breakdowns. No breakdowns, no intention, generally called retirement. Just take a minute to think. Do those 3 short sentences make intuitive sense? For some people, yes. For others, no. Either way, here comes another short story to help illustrate. So imagine I wake up one Saturday morning early, and the first thing I think to myself is, my intention is to have a nice breakfast. I then say to myself, to accomplish this intention, I'm going to have a bowl of cereal and read the newspaper. I then hop out of bed, go to the pantry, pick out a cereal, the one with the most sugar, of course, pour the cereal into a bowl, grab a spoon, run outside and get the newspaper, take everything into the kitchen table, and then turn to go to the fridge. When I open the fridge, given that we are talking about breakdowns, what do you suppose I find? Right, no milk. And be honest with yourself, what do you think will be the first thing I will say to myself when I realize that there is no milk in the refrigerator? Right again, oh shnikey. People sometimes will ask us, what exactly do you mean by a breakdown? We mean this moment in time when you say to yourself some version of oh shnikey. These are the punches to the face that Tyson warned us about earlier, and each punch takes you to a crossroads where you will either lose your balance and end up wasting time, or find a way to keep your balance so that you can continue to move forward. To finish out my little story here, let's see what happens next when I start to lose my balance. So I open the refrigerator, there's no milk. Now look at that downward facing arrow. First thing, emotional upset, anger. Can't the guy just have a nice Saturday? Then the judgments start. What's wrong with my wife? She must not love me. The kids are drinking too much milk. And then finally the recurrent action, which is to pick a fight with my wife when she comes out of the bedroom, and now Saturday is ruined before it ever got started. So on this non-work related example, it's quiz time. And who cares if you get the right answer, but go with your gut response. First question, what is the breakdown in my story? I will pause for a second while you think about that. Right, the breakdown itself is the moment I realized that I had no milk. Again, that was the oh shnikey moment. Don't get caught up in the problem story about my wife and kids. Stay focused on the fundamentals. Now, second question, what is the cause of this breakdown? Again, a pause while you think. If you said intention, then you are spot on. But now, what was my intention? It was to have cereal, right? No, it was not to have cereal. My intention was to have a nice breakfast, remember? Now, why would this be an important distinction to make? Because this understanding provides me with a compass. Clarity of intention in the moment of a breakdown is the difference between getting swept away and staying on point. And all of that leads us to the a priori rule of balance. Please write this one down. In the moment of the breakdown, do not focus on the breakdown itself. Focus on your intention. See, think about the no milk story. What if I focus on the breakdown in that story? I might go out and start designing solutions to the breakdown, like getting a second refrigerator for my garage and stocking it with milk. Or I might go out and buy a cow. That would mean I wouldn't run out of milk for a while, right? But the point is, these solutions may be ingenious, but are they helping me with my intention to have a nice breakfast? I think not. If we go to the map now, look at what this mechanism of focusing on the intention in a breakdown does. It automatically opens up the upward-facing arrow. With the intention as a compass, we can much more easily get into a conversation for possibilities, look at the opportunities, and consider new actions. As a matter of fact, what would be some possibilities in my short story given my intention for a nice breakfast? See, if you ask that question to children, they'll come up with 100 possibilities in 2 minutes. I could go get milk myself if it really is about cereal. Or I could pour orange juice or Coca-Cola on the cereal instead. Or I could just make myself something else to eat. Or I could put my family on a plane and go have a nice breakfast in Paris. Oh, wait a minute. I could drive to the local Starbucks, pick up a scone and a coffee for me and my wife, come home and serve her breakfast in bed. That might even help my personal brand on the home front. The point is, possibilities are something that could happen but probably won't. The reason for this definition? Yep, no judgmental speaking. That just shuts down the learning. Then we draw from our laundry list of possibilities and begin factoring in real life, time, money, whatever, to come up with a short list of opportunities. Then we try some new actions, some of which will work, some of which will not. We are not promising unicorns and rainbows. Remember, we never said that successful installation of this map would make the breakdowns go away. Life is breakdown, solution, then you die. Instead, success with this map will lead to 2 very tangible outcomes. Number 1, you and your team will begin to get through your breakdowns quicker, as less time is spent on the downward-facing arrow. Number 2, you and your team will have new and different breakdowns. This is key, because if you and your team are having the same breakdowns over and over, very simply that means there's no learning in the environment, and if there's no learning in the environment, then you don't have a team. See, if you look at the map in your workbook, at the bottom of the downward-facing arrow is the word gang. A gang is a group of people fighting for power at each other's expense. Think of a street gang. If one guy stabs a guy in his own gang, he moves up. This is typically the best it gets in most organizational performance. But we are not interested in gang performance. Instead, we are looking for teams. Teams are a rare commodity, difficult to create, easy to maintain, and impossible to duplicate. A team is a group of ambitious and potentially disagreeable people aligned on producing an intention. Going forward, you and your colleagues need to decide which way on this map you want to play. As a gang where everyone is focused on individual survival, or as a team where we are coordinating our action to produce an aligned intention for the future. Wow, all of this from those first 3 sentences of that last paragraph? Yep. The source of every breakdown in your life is your intention. No intention, no breakdowns, no breakdowns, no intention. This shifts the accountability of breakdowns away from the victim of circumstance mentality. Oh, why is this happening to me? And shifts it back to the individual and the committed community. Oh, this is happening to us because we have an intention. Now, given that intention, what is the next most powerful move we can make? When you have individuals and a team that can play this way, you are on your way to a championship run. For just a second, let's summarize what we have established thus far. Number 1, all projects are driven by a commitment to more identity. Number 2, all projects have breakdowns. Number 3, breakdowns are, therefore, inevitable. Number 4, gangs see breakdowns as problems. Think, we should try to avoid breakdowns, which means they miss out on learning opportunities, which means they don't prosper. 5, teams see breakdowns only as stops in the action, seek to avoid recurrent breakdowns, are able to learn together, grow, and eventually prosper. Now for fun, consider that kids don't need a map like this. Only we as adults do. It's why children learn so much faster than adults. For example, a few years ago I was at a party at a friend's house, keep in mind we live in the desert, and all of our kids were out back playing soccer. As I watched the kids playing while I was drinking a glass of lemonade, one of the kids kicked the ball into one of the cacti out back and the ball went flat. In about 3 seconds I watched the downward-facing arrow in my head go like this. Oh, shnikey, that sure is frustrating. That was kind of stupid that they were playing soccer around all the cacti in the backyard. I'm going to go out there and lecture those kids as to how that wasn't so smart. Then I caught myself. Duh, wait a minute. See, what was the intention of those children? Right. Their intention had nothing to do with playing soccer. Their intention was to have fun. And kids are connected to their intentions in life. So one of the kids just ran over to the ball, pulled it off the cactus, took out the thorns, put the ball on the dog, and the kids just started chasing the dog. Possibilities, opportunities, new action in about 5 seconds. How do you do when there's a breakdown in your life? How does your team do? Those are the questions for you to think about going forward. Let's move now to the last part of our discussion. The first sentence of the last paragraph says, "The essence of balance is knowing when you have lost it." Who's going to be the last person to know that they've lost their balance? Right, the person who is losing it. Think about this in the context of sports. The guy arguing with the referee is the last guy to know he's lost his balance. He's just right. The ref is just wrong. That's why there's a bench in sports and a coach. Sometimes you're no good for the team. And if the coach or your teammates can't get you off the field, in some sports there are penalty boxes. And in all sports, ultimately, there's a cold shower in the locker room. As a matter of fact, one of the great all-time examples of lost balance happened in sports in soccer's World Cup in 2006. One of the best players for the French team literally headbutted an Italian player who was saying terrible things we all learned later about his sister and mother. In the language here, the French player lost his balance and got kicked out of the game. While we all might agree with his story about what an awful person the Italian player is, the French lost, and their names are not carved in the World Cup. This should serve as a great reminder for all of us, that in life you either have the future you intend, or you have your reasons why not, and you can't have both. Keep your balance so that you can stay on track for the future you intend. Don't have your stories about why not. For the final few sentences on this map, I'm going to read them aloud for all of us and then ask one final question for you to consider before we wrap up. What it says here is, without the ability to distinguish the cause of a breakdown, which is intention, from the breakdown itself, people automatically lose their balance. They begin taking recurrent, ineffective actions that address the symptoms of a breakdown, which are your feelings. But unfortunately in the game of business, your market doesn't care about your feelings. It only cares about its own satisfaction. So that leads us to the final question for you to consider. What do all of us, including me, get paid for? While you are thinking about that, it might be good to show you a visual. At the left on this spectrum through time is when your client first wants for something to happen. At some point, the client needs to think of you and your company over your competition. Then once you secure the business, you must execute on your commitments and ultimately produce results. We show you this spectrum because so many people respond to the question, what do all of us get paid for, by simply saying results. And while this is not a wrong answer, it overlooks an important fact. See, look back on the spectrum between the client intending to produce something and when you were hired. There is something that must have happened right there for your client. Can you see what it is? Right. Your client must have had a breakdown, an oh shnikey moment. So when you look at this last question one more time, what do all of us get paid for? What you should see now is that the true answer is that all any of us get paid for is to be a solution to other people's breakdowns. Think about that for a minute. So if you and your team are no good at handling your own breakdowns, you will never get good at handling the breakdowns of your clients. Therefore, consider embracing breakdowns as inevitable, as opportunities for learning. Turn into them and get your backyard in order. Once you do, then you can turn, face your market, and focus solely on their breakdowns without any background noise. That approach will give you a huge advantage in the game of business. And so, there you go. Balance. This time we leave you with perspective from someone who knows something about winning championships. Former men's collegiate basketball coach at the University of California at Los Angeles in the US of A, John Wooden. Next to love, balance is the most important thing. And on that note, we are done, except, of course, for your practice assignments. And again, we want you to be as happy as this gentleman is to work on your assignments this week, keeping in mind that they've been designed to help you keep the learning alive. Please plan to complete your assignments no later than end of business the day before our next application meeting. We will look forward to it. Thank you for listening, and now get back in the game.